Okay, Boker Tov. Good morning, everyone. So we're resuming on Masechet Makkot Daf Yud Daled Amud Bet. Yud Daled Amud Bet. We're making our way through the third and final Perek. We'll go back. We'll pick up about a third of the way down on the page where we had the two dots where we said Tamei Shachalat HaKodesh. It gets a little bit technical over here. A lot of limudim, a lot of different derivations from Psukim. A lot of musagim to do with Kodesh and Truma, etc. Things which are not so practically applicable nowadays, but nonetheless, we'll try and understand. We had in our Mishnah, you remember there were there were many separate prohibitions we spoke about, which are Chayiv Karet, which are Chayiv Makkot as well, and we spoke about both a Tamei person entering the Mikdash and a Tamei person eating Kodesh, eating from the basar of the korbanot. So for each of these, again, we know that we need there's going to have to be an azhara in the Torah. There's going to have to be an azhara, meaning a prohibition, and there's also going to have to be the onesh, the punishment, the penalty is going to have to be specified. We need that in two separate psukim. So the Gemara says, going again from the two dots, about 4 lines up from the wide lines. It says Tamei Shachalat HaKodesh. Said the Gemara Bishlama Ba'al HaMikdash Tamei Ktiv Onesh Uktiv Azara. So regarding one who enters the Mikdash when they are Tamei in the state of Tumah, that's okay. We understand that because we have the Onesh written and we have the Azhara written. Onesh Dichtiv Et Mishkan Hashem Timei V'Nichrota Azhara V'Lo Yitamod Machanehem. Right, so regarding the onesh, that's the first pasuk. It says et mishkan Hashem timei v'nichrota, referring to karet, and therefore from there we see the onesh, and also the azhara, the separate pasuk. It needs to be the prohibition where it talks about certain people who have different forms of tumah who will be sent out of the machaneh, and from there we learn that there is a prohibition as well. Lo tamu et machanehem. So that is regarding somebody who's tamei who enters the mikdash. Now. Ela tamei shachalat HaKodesh. What about the person who's tamei who ate the kodesh? Bishlama onesh. So it's okay. We have the onesh, the penalty, which is written tichtiv v'anefesh asher tochal basar mizevach hashlamim asher Hashem v'tumato alav v'nichreta. Right. So there you have it explicitly. The pasuk says anefesh asher tochal. Somebody is going to eat basar mizevach hashlamim. So somebody is going to eat from Zevach Hashlamim, Asher Hashem, v'tum'ato alav, while they are in a state of Tumah v'nichrota, they're going to get karet. So that is the onesh. However, where is the azhara? And azhara minayin. We don't find the pasuk that tells us explicitly that one cannot eat, do not eat the basar kodesh when you are tamei. So here we had a machloket between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Whereas Rami Reish Lakish Omer b'chol kodesh lo tiga, Rabbi Yochanan Omer tani ba'atela atya tumato tumato. So Reish Lakish says we learn it from pasuk. We learn which pasuk? The pasuk that says b'chol kodesh lo tiga. Now, as we explained, this pasuk is referring to a yoledet, referring to a woman who's given birth, who then has a certain state of tumah for a number of days, and there it says basar kodesh lo tiga. She cannot touch the basar kodesh, cannot touch the meat of the korbanot. At this point, we assume that Reish Lakish understands that when it says b'chol kodesh lo tiga means don't eat. Okay, we're going to see the Gemara is actually going to question two things in this pasuk. It's going to question, first of all, how do you know that b'chol kodesh actually refers to what it sounds like it's referring to, kodesh, referring to korbanot. Maybe it's referring to truma, which is also called kodesh. And number two, how do you know that it's referring to eating? It sounds like the pasuk, the pshat sounds like it's saying touching. Right? There's also going to be a prohibition for a tamei person to touch certain things. So, but at this point, Reish Lakish understands b'chol kodesh lo tiga. From here, we derive a prohibition for anybody who is tamei to eat from the kodesh. Says Rashi over here points out. Says Rashi a little bit further down. Says B'chol kodesh lo tiga v'darshinan le lekaman azhara la'ochel. right? We're going to learn it out that that's actually the azhara for somebody who eats. Okay, the Rashi before that, where he says Ela azhara minalan. This is our question: where do we have the azhara for somebody who eats the kodshim in when they are tamei? He says Leika lameima mi bakodshim lo yachel v'gomer. Says Rashi, don't learn out from the pasuk that says says later, don't eat from the kodshim, the state of tumah. The lo mayri bekodshim ela bitruma. That pasuk, which seems to imply telling you that somebody who's tamei cannot eat from the kodshim, that is not actually referring to kodshim. That's referring to truma. Says Rashi. Dichtiv bei ish mizera Aaron, because that pasuk, we're going to see this in the Gemara. It says ish mizera Aaron, everybody from the offspring of Aaron, everybody from the descendants of Aaron. What does everybody mean? Means davar shaveh b'zaro shel Aaron, something that's going to be equal by all the descendants of Aaron, meaning men and women. And therefore we're going to say it's going to be talking about truma. Why? Shehi shaveh b'anashim u'v'nafshim. That is going to be equal. In other words, both male Kohanim and female Kohanim, the daughter of a Kohen or the wife of a Kohen, can eat from the Truma as well. So somebody asked this. So what does it mean here, afa chozeret? It means if a woman is a bat Kohen. So again, certain parts of the korbanot are only consumed within the mikdash, and they are only going to be consumed by the male Kohanim. Certain parts of the korbanot, the shok and the chazer, for example, can be consumed by the female Kohanim as well. Truma, as we said, men and women can eat that equally, only Kohanim. So if a woman is born into a family of Kohanim, one is the daughter of a Kohen, she can eat Truma just like the rest of her family. What happens if she goes and gets married to a Yisrael? When she goes and gets married to a Yisrael, so she's no longer a Kohen. She's she's still a bat Kohen because her father was a Kohen, but she no longer has that status, and therefore she cannot eat from Truma. Same thing, vice versa. What if there's a woman who is a bat Yisrael and she marries a Kohen? So when she marries him, she can go then and eat Truma just like the rest of her family. If they don't have children and the husband dies or they get divorced, so then that's what we say chozeret. Then the woman returns back to her original status. If she already has children, so then it's different. Then it retains. But let's say she didn't have children. She is a Bat Yisrael and she married a Kohen. They don't have any children. He dies or they get divorced. So she goes back. She now can no longer eat from. She can no longer eat from the truma. Or the other case, if she's the daughter of a Kohen, right, and she marries a Yisrael, they don't have any children, and they get divorced, or he dies, then she goes back to the status of being a Bat Kohen, and she can now go and eat Truma again. So regarding the other parts, so what Rashi tells us, Chazeh v'shok, these are the parts of the meat of the animal, that would not apply. We say afa chozeret, eina chozeret lechazeh v'shok. However, chozeret letruma, she goes back to eating truma, and therefore we see that truma is that food which has the same status for men or women, meaning the same status for all of Zera Aharon, and that's why from that pasuk, even though the pasuk says don't eat from the kodshim when you are tameh, because it says ish mizera Aharon, we learn out that it is referring to truma and is not referring to basar kodshim. So therefore we're left with the question of this the azhara of basar kodshim for somebody who is tameh. How do we know that they can't eat it from the Torah? So we said Reish Lakish says he learns from this other pasuk of b'chol kodesh lo tiga. He learns from that pasuk. Rabbi Yochanan learned differently. Rabbi Yochanan amar tani ba'adala atya mi tumato. He says we learn it out. Says Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Ba'adala, and as we explained last week, whenever we have a Gzerah Shavah, it needs to be learned out from a tradition. One needs to have the Masoret. We can't just make up Gzerot Shavot by ourselves. So he says tumato. This is the Gzerah Shavah. The word tumato appears twice. K'tiv hacha v'tumato alav v'nichrata. It says here, as we've just seen regarding the onesh of one who eats basar kodshim in Tum'ah, there it says Tumato alav, right? V'nichrata. And also Ktiv Hatam in the pasuk we saw earlier, it says Tamei yeh od Tumato bo. That was the pasuk where we learned out the onesh for somebody who goes into the mikdash or somebody who goes into the mishkan tamei. Right, the full pasuk it says Kol hanogea bamet. This is in Bamidbar Yutet Yud Gimel. Kol hanogea bamet b'nefesh adam. Somebody who comes into contact with the corpse, right, which is avia avot tumah, v'lo yitchata, and has not become tahor, has not done what's required in order for that process. Et mishkan Hashem timei. They have made the Mishkan Tamei, so to speak. V'nichrata hanefesh ha'im Yisrael. That is the punishment. V'nichrata hanefesh ha'im Yisrael. Kimei nida lo zarak alav tamei yeh od tum'ato bo. And there again you see that word tum'ato. So these two psukim, both of them have got the word tumato. Now it's true that both are referring to the onesh. Both of the psukim are referring to the onesh of v'nichrata. However, what's the Gzera Shava? What's the limud? It says, Ktiv hacha v'tumato alav v'nichrata. Uktiv hatam tamei od tumato bo. We're about 5 lines down from the wide lines in the Gemara. Ma lahalan onesh v'azara. The Gzera Shava means that we associate both the Yisur of going into the Mikdash Tamei with the Yisur of eating from the Basar Kodshim Tamei. Just as Ma lahalan onesh v'azara, afkan onesh v'azara. Just as over there is an onesh and an azara, so to here there is an onesh and an azara. Okay, so it's an interesting way of learning it, meaning he's saying there is no explicit azara in the pasuk, but we learn from the Gzera Shava to another case whereby there is an azara, that here there should be an azara too. That is how Rabbi Yochanan learns it. So that's the machloket, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish learns out from the pasuk, Rabbi Yochanan learns out from the Gzera Shava. So now says the Gemara, okay, Bishlama Reish Lakish lo amar Rabbi Yochanan Gzera Shava lo gamir. Okay, so he says, so we understand why Reish Lakish doesn't learn like Rabbi Yochanan, because he did not have this tradition of this Gzera Shava. It's an interesting point. Some Mufashim point out over here, which is we know Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, amongst other things, they were also related. They were also chavrutas. They learned together, and Rabbi Yochanan was the Rebbe of Reish Lakish. So when the Gemara says Reish Lakish never received this Gzera Shava from his teachers, he never had this tradition, right? Why not? Meaning, if Reish Lakish learned from Rabbi Yochanan, surely Rabbi Yochanan taught him all the Gzero Shavot, and then he would have had that. He would have had that tradition. So it could be some of them Farshim point out that they had a tradition that there was a certain number of Gzerot Shavot, right? Certain number. It's a little bit like when we have the mitzvot. We have 613 mitzvot, and you have the different monah mitzvot. Try and count them. Nobody agrees which they are. Everybody agrees that they have to be exactly 613. So you see, you have the Rambam in his Sefer HaMitzvot, and you have the Smag, and you have the Sefer Yereim, and they Sadia Gaon, and often they argue with each other. They say, no, you shouldn't include this one, but you have to include that one. It's a bit like a big jigsaw puzzle. So how many do you get? So it might be the same thing, with the Gzerot Shavot. So Reish Lakish already had these Gzera Shavas, and then Rabbi Yochanan came and taught him this Gzera Shava. He said, no, he's already got it. Doesn't fit in. But in any event, so the Gemara says, okay, so for one reason or another, Reish Lakish did not have this tradition. He did not have this Gzera Shava, and therefore he had to learn it out from the pasuk. But Rabbi Yochanan, might tamel amar Reish Lakish. Right? Obviously, as the Ritva points out, it's going to be better to learn it from a pasuk explicitly rather than from a Gzera Shava. Right? Makes more sense, and it's a much more explicit limit. So why does Rabbi Yochanan not learn out this azara from the pasuk the same way that Reish Lakish did? And Rabbi Yochanan might tell me Reish Lakish. So Amar lecha, how azara litruma? So Rabbi Yochanan will tell you, no, this pasuk of Bechol Kodesh Lo Tiga says, I learn out from here, there is an azhara. I learn out here, there is a warning, there is a prohibition against touching what? Touching truma. The pasuk's not talking about Basar Kodshim, but it's talking about truma, which is also called Kodesh in the Torah. So he says, how azhara? Now look at Rashi. It's actually Rashi a little bit later. Rashi points out here, he says, we're going to get to that. But at this point, the Gemara is still assuming that it's talking about eating truma. So Rabbi Yochanan maitam elamak Reish Lakish amalacha hau azhara letruma. So Reish Lakish azhara letruma menale. So everybody agrees that yes, that eating truma is also going to be something which is truma, which is tameh. Is also going to be a prohibition. And where is Reish Lakish going to learn that from? So he learns out the azhara for truma from this pasuk, and this is what Rashi quoted to us earlier. He says, "Manale nafkale me ish mizera Aaron v'hu tzara ozav." Okay, helpful to see the full pasuk over there. This is in Vayikra Kafbet pasuk Daled. It says ish mizera Aaron v'hu tzara ozav. So these are examples. Somebody is a mitzara, who is a zav, different types of tum'ah. It says bakodshim lo yochal ad asher yitar. So somebody who's interesting. The pasuk tells us one of the kohanim who is tameh cannot eat. Here it says explicitly eat. It does not say lotiga. It says bakodshim lo yochal. So that would seem to be the most obvious and the most explicit source to say that one cannot eat the kodshim when they are tameh. Rashi already pointed out to us, based on this limit in the Gemara, why no one's going to learn from here the azara for eating kodshim in tuma. But we're saying that Reish Lakish learns out from here, even though it says kodshim, he learns out that this is talking about truma. This is the azara against eating truma. And why does he learn it from here? Says the Gemara, this is the limud that Rashi mentioned earlier. Reish Lakish azara letruma menale nafkale mi ish mizera Aaron v'utzarozav ezu davar shu shaveh b'zal'o shel Aaron. What is it that is going to be shaveh, that is going to be equal with all the descendants of Aaron, i.e. men and women? Havei omer zot truma. So this is referring to truma. So Rashi over here, Rashi tells us sheshaveh b'zar'o shel Aaron b'anashim u'vanashim, by men and women as well. Aval kodshim einan ne'achalim ela lizchalim, but the kodshim are only going to be eaten by the male kohanim. V'chitema ika chazeh v'shok. You're going to say, well, there is still the chazeh and the shok, again, parts of the meat, parts of the korban, which can be given to the female kohanim as well. So later b'chozeret, that does not apply where in the case of, as we explained already, a chozeret, meaning kagon almana u'grusha v'zera ein la. You have a woman who's a widow or divorcee, meaning she was married to well, if she was the daughter of a kohen, and she was married to Yisrael, who then died or they got divorced. Zera Eilan, they don't have any descendants, don't have any children. There we say there's an opinion quoted in the Gemara in Yevamot that the woman will then go back to being a bat kohen regarding truma, but not regarding chazeh v'shok. Okay, so what have we seen up to this point? So we said that Rabbi Yochanan does not learn like Reish Lakish from the pasuk of V'chol Kodesh Lo Tiga as the azhara for eating Kodesh B'tuma, because he learns that is the azhara for eating Truma B'tuma. Okay, where does Reish Lakish learn the azhara for eating Truma B'tuma? He learns it from this pasuk of Ish Mizera Aaron. Okay, so continues the Gemara now. Now it says V'idach. Again, we're doing this ping pong. Each time we learn out the pasuk how Reish Lakish learns it, we need to know how Rabbi Yochanan learns it, and vice versa. So if we just said that from this pasuk Me'ish Ish Mizera Aaron, that Reish Lakish learns it out for eating truma, but Rabbi Yochanan seemingly does not. So what does Rabbi Yochanan do with this pasuk? It says V'idach. It says Haul Achila Vaha Linegia. He says no. He says you need to learn it out for one pasuk is for achila, and one pasuk is going to be from negia. In other words, everybody agrees that this pasuk Ish Mizera Aaron is referring to, even though it says kodshim, it's referring to truma. I mean, Rabbi Yochanan agrees with the drasha that Reish Lakish learned, that once it says Ish Mizera Aaron, this pasuk is referring to truma itself. But our question was, The question was, Reish Lakish learns out from Yad the Azara against eating truma when a person is tamei. Rabbi Yochanan has already learned the Azara for eating truma when a person is tamei from the pasuk that says B'chol Kodesh lo tiga. So now says the Gemara, actually no. Actually, when the pasuk says B'chol Kodesh lo tiga, and we said Rabbi Yochanan learned an Azara there for truma, it meant Rabbi Yochanan learned an Azara for touching truma, right? Because the pasuk says for touching it. Over here, the pasuk talks about eating it. So those are two separate prohibitions, and those are two separate azharot, and that's what the Gemara now is saying. The idach meaning Rabbi Yochanan, hahu la achila, v'ha la negia. Rabbi Yochanan agrees that this pasuk of ish ish mizera Aaron we learn out as an azhara for the prohibition against eating truma, but the other pasuk we learn as the prohibition of touching truma. So now we go back to Reish Lakish. Right? We said that Reish Lakish learns out, he derives from this pasuk. Also, there's something very interesting which comes out now, meaning what is the machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? Again, we've had two psukim. We said that the first pasuk of Lotiga, well, we just said according to Rabbi Yochanan, that's easy. The first pasuk of Mikol B'chol Kodesh Lotiga is the Azara for touching truma. This pasuk Ish Ish Mizera Aaron is the Azara for eating truma. Okay, obviously in tuma. If a person's not in a state of tuma, then they can eat it, they can touch it if they're okay. Reish Lakish learned out differently. Reish Lakish said that first pasuk of B'chol Kodesh is the Azara for eating Kodshim, right? And this pasuk is the Azara for eating truma. So what we see is that there's also a machloket between them about how to derive the psukim, but there's also a machloket between them whether there is bichlal an Azara for touching truma. It works out according to Rabbi Yochanan that for touching truma in tuma there is an Azara, and that's going to be on Ishkaret. Whereas according to Reish Lakish, that does not exist. So you actually have, in Rabbi Yochanan's view, something whereby truma is going to be more stringent than kodshim, because just by touching it when one is tamei, that is its own prohibition. Okay, says the Gemara now the following. We're going back to we continue now with the opinion of Reish Lakish. So we are about 1, 2, 3, 4, about 10 to 12 lines down from the wide lines. The line that begins, it says Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish hay b'chol kodesh lo tigala. We're going back to our original derivation. We said where do we have the Azara for eating kodshim when one is tamei? Rabbi Yochanan learned it from a Gzera Shava. Reish Lakish learned it from the pasuk of b'chol kodesh lo tiga. But now says the Gemara, wait a minute. Reish Lakish learns out from b'chol kodesh lo tiga. He learns something else. Is going to be a different limud he has from that pasuk, and therefore, how can we say that he learns from b'chol kodesh lo tiga for the Azara for achilat kodshim in tuma? It says Reish Lakish hay b'chol kodesh lo tiga lahachi yudata. He needs to learn it out for the following halacha. He needs to say something else. How mibayale le? Sorry, meaning. That's a question, right? So, meaning, is it coming to serve this purpose? Is it coming to teach us that which you've said? Rather, Reish Lakish needs to learn it out, not for that, but he needs to learn it for somebody who's tamei who touched kodesh. Again, the pasuk says b'chol kodesh lo tiga, don't touch it. So and Reish Lakish says that there is an issur to touch it. Where does he learn that out from this pasuk? So Dietma Tamei Shanaga Kodesh, Reish Lakish Omer Loke, Rabbi Yochanan Omer Eino Loke. Right, we have a machloket between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan as to whether somebody who's tamei who touches the Kodesh, would they get Malkut or not. Reish Lakish says yes, and Rabbi Yochanan says no. Let's just see why they how each one derives it, and then we'll go back and explain. Right? Reish Lakish Omer Loke. Reish Lakish says one gets Malkut. Why? Because it says B'chol Kodesh Lo Tigah. That's the same pasuk. Right? Rabbi Yochanan Omer Ein Loke. He says, how azara l'truma udata? Rabbi Yochanan says no, there is no Makkot, because that pasuk, which Reish Lakish learns from, says b'chol kodesh lo tigah. Rabbi Yochanan learns that out as an azhara for truma, as we've just learned out, as an azhara for touching truma. So again, here you see explicitly, first of all, you see that for Rabbi Yochanan, there is an azhara for touching truma, but there is no azhara for touching kodesh when one is tamei. So this is quite surprising, but it comes out according to Rabbi Yochanan, and Tosfot discusses this point. Says comes out to Rabbi Yochanan that here you have chomer ba truma sheba kodesh. Normally we would say that kodesh is more chamur, is more severe than truma, but over here there is a stringency by truma which does not exist by kodesh, which is that just touching it when one is tamei, that is an explicit prohibition. But we see Reish Lakish learns out from the fact that it says b'chol kodesh lo tigah. He learned from that pasuk that one cannot touch kodesh. So then, where does Reish Lakish learn out that one cannot the azara for eating kodshim when one is tamei? Right. Initially, we said Reish Lakish learns out b'chol kodesh lo tigah that is an azara for eating. But here we're saying in this itma that Reish Lakish learns there is an azara for touching. So we say that actually we learn both. Mida'ab kerachmana b'leshon negia says from the fact that the Torah wrote it with the language of negia, meaning because it said lo tiga, azhara leochel itkash kodesh lemikdash. In other words, what Reish Lakish is saying is the following. Saying this pasuk, when you look at the context of the pasuk, and here it's a little bit confusing, because the Gemara right now does not explain it explicitly. It's only a few lines later where the Gemara is going to actually explain what it means, and Rashi is going to fill us in now, which we'll say in a moment. But for whatever reason, the reason we're about to explain, Reish Lakish understands that the primary topic of this pasuk is talking about somebody who eats kodshim b'tumah. The fact that, and from there, and that is the main azara, and that is what we learn. The fact that a pasuk dealing with somebody eating does not use the word eating, but it uses the word negiyah. So from there we learn that as well, in addition to there being an azara against eating when one is tamei, there is also an azara against touching the basar kodshim when one is tamei. Right, that's what it says here. Since the fact that Torah used the language of negia in a pasuk which is actually talking about azara lo'ochel, talking about an azara for somebody who eats, so therefore we say itkush kodesh lemikdash. In other words, that's how we know. That's how we know that the azara is for the is for somebody who eats, because it juxtaposes. There is a hekesh in the pasuk between kodesh and mikdash. What do we mean by that? Have a look at Rashi. Rashi says here on the first long line in Rashi, mid'itkash kodesh lemikdash, and it says b'hai kra b'chol kodesh lo tigah. So that's what we've been quoting the whole time. We mentioned before, one of the problems when you're learning and drashing out psukim, often the Gemara will quote part of the pasuk, but sometimes the drasha actually is dependent on a different part of the pasuk. Again, the assumption of Ravina and Ravashi when they read the Gemara was that when you study the Gemara, you'll know all the psukim off by heart, right, which I'm sure you will do. So it says, if you have a look at the pasuk, Rashi tells us, b'chol kodesh lo tigah, as we've been saying, continues, don't touch the kodesh, which we've been explaining now, whether that means touching or eating, but that's referring to the korban. And don't enter the mikdash. Don't enter the mikdash when you are tamei. So he says like this: V'dashina lakaman. We're going to learn out later what is the hekesh between eating the kodshim and entering the mikdash, just as is dashina lakaman. Ma mikdash yesh ba'azarato netilat neshama. Just as entering the mikdash when you are tamei, that azara contains netilat neshama, that is going to lead one to death, to premature death. In other words, to karet. Just as going into the mikdash tamei carries the penalty of karet, af azarat kodesh, so too the azara for kodesh, which appears just before that in the pasuk of the b'chol kodesh lo tigah, that is going to be of a similar nature. That is also going to be davar sheish bo netilat neshama. That's also going to be something which contains the penalty of karet. Vainu achila, she'anosh alei karet, ilu benigia leika karet. Because if it was eating basar kodshim in tuma, that would be anush karet, whereas touching it simply would not be anush karet. So therefore, from the fact that it's related to the pasuk says b'chol kodesh lo tigav ela mikdash tamei, since it juxtaposes kodesh and mikdash, right? We know that the kodesh that it's talking about, the prohibition regarding the basar kodshim, is similar to the prohibition regarding the mikdash, regarding entering the mikdash when one is tamei. Just as when one enters the mikdash tamei, that would be anush karet. So too, the prohibition it's talking about regarding the basar kodshim is one which carries the penalty of karet. Which prohibition is that? That is the prohibition of eating, not the prohibition of touching. And therefore, Reish Lakish understands from the fact that it says B'chol Kodesh and it says Ala Mikdash, the pasuk is definitely talking about eating. It's talking about eating the kodshim when you are tamei. If it's talking about eating, why did it use the language of lo tiga, of touching, to teach you that not only is there a prohibition, not only is there azhara against eating when one is tamei, but also there's the prohibition against touching when one is tamei, right? This kind of limud, this mida abkei rachmana b'lashon negiyah, reminds us of, for example, we discussed last week or a couple of weeks ago, when the Torah says lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo, the Torah says don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. It says that 3 times. We know only one of them is actually referring to cooking. One of them is referring to eating. One of them is referring to getting benefit. So why? So it says, since the Torah writes it in the language of tevashel, it teaches you that is when it's done derech bishul, when it's done in the way of the way that you would normally cook. That is going to be the deoraita prohibition. There are additional Rabbanan prohibitions. But so to over here, from the fact that it says kodesh, it says tiga, even though it's talking about eating, but it tells you there's a separate prohibition for touching as well. Of course, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't need to get into all of this, because Rabbi Yochanan understands differently that this pasuk, b'chol kodesh, is talking about truma, and it's talking about, and it is talking about lo tiga. He learns that in a different.
Rabbi Kenigsberg.
Yeah.
Rabbi Kenigsberg, question. We're talking about different things here. We're talking about lo tiga, we're talking don't touch, we're talking about eating, and we were talking about entering the kodesh as well. Now, those are different things. If he touches the piece of meat, for example, won't be able to be eaten by anybody, and it has to be burnt. It has to be disposed of. Right or not?
Yeah.
It has to be disposed of. But he can't make he can't go into the kodesh kodshim. He can't do that and make it tamei. The fact that he's gone in, he has done something wrong, but he hasn't actually changed the status of what he's gone into. Whereas if he touches the meat, he has changed the status, and that has to be disposed of.
Yeah. Correct.
This is all theoretical at this point.
It might be theoretical, but we're talking about different things here, yet they're applying the same.
The point is, right, but the reason it's applied together is because it's in the same pasuk. That's the point. It says, it's one after the other. It says, why can't I find the pasuk now? It says b'chol kodesh lo tiga ve'ela mikdash lo tavo. Right? Don't touch the kodesh, and don't enter into the into the mikdash.
So therefore, if he did enter, it doesn't change the status of the mikdash, except that now we've got to decide: does he get malchus or what? It's the punishment we're talking about, but he doesn't change the status. With the other, if he touch altigata, when he talks about the meat,
right,
nobody else can eat it. That's got to then be disposed of.
Right, correct. Whether it's the meat or whether it's truma, whatever it is, that
becomes exactly.
Yeah.
Tuma today, that's what I'm going to ask. First of all, Tuma and Masrot, is it Rabbanan or Deoraita?
Well,
in terms of fruits, vegetables, and so forth.
But it depends what it's on. It depends what it's on, but you can still have a situation of Trumot and Masrot Deoraita nowadays. But again, as we mentioned before, the truma, the difference is truma is what has to be eaten, has to be kept in tahara, and has to be eaten in tahara. So we can't do that today. The only time when you can give a kohen their truma and they can actually use it is if you have oil, which is truma oil, and you can give it to a kohen and they can light it for their Hanukkah lights. That's fine. But otherwise, that's why we take the absolute minimum that we have to of the truma, which can be anything. And we dispose of it respectfully because we can't do anything with it.
That's right. They put it into a bin, the farmers, and it gets thrown out.
Meiser is different. Meiser is different because Meiser Rishon, Meiser can be redeemed, and then you can eat it. Regarding Meiser Rishon or regarding Meiser Sheni, right? Meiser Ani, that can still be used. That can still be eaten. But it's but Truma, there's nothing we can do with today. Okay, so that is how Reish Lakish learns out from that. So what we said originally, that mi b'chol kodesh lo tiga, the Reish Lakish learns out from there the azara against eating the b'sar kodesh when one is tameh. That still stands, but he also learns from the fact that it says lo tiga, prohibition against touching. Okay. So now we continue. So it says, but nonetheless, we still have a problem. Says the Gemara, Vakati adayin, right? Still, nonetheless, lahachi udata. Can you still say that he learns it from here? Because don't we say that Reish Lakish is going to learn this pasuk from something else? How mi bayale letamei shachal basar kodesh lifnei zrikat damim. Don't we say that Reish Lakish needs to learn from this pasuk regarding somebody who was tamei, who ate from the basar kodesh before zrikat damim, meaning before the blood of this animal was scattered on the mizbeach. But the truth is that before zrikat damim, that is considered that the korban, the avodah of the korban, has not been completed, and therefore no one's allowed to eat it, right? Even if somebody was tahor, at that point, they aren't allowed to eat it. It's only after zrikat damim that anybody could eat it. So the discussion over here is going to be that when we say there is an additional azhara, there's an additional warning for somebody to eat somebody who's tamei to eat the basar kodshim, surely we're talking about at the time, which is after zrikat damim, meaning when anybody could eat it, but yeah, there's an additional, there's a prohibition for this person to eat it. Beforehand, before zrikat damim, nobody could eat it. But so it seems to be, Reish Lakish learns out from here that in addition to the fact that no one can eat it because the korban has not yet had its service completed, that additionally to that, if the person was tamei, there is another prohibition of eating it before zrikat damim. So that's what it says he learns over here. It says, Zakati elachi udata, how mibayre letamei shachal basar kodesh lifnei zrikat damim. That somebody was tamei who ate this basar kodesh before zrikat damim, the itma. Right, we learn the Amoraim say Tamei shachal basar kodesh lifnei zrikat damim. Reish Lakish omer lokeh, Rabbi Yochanan omer eino lokeh. Again, we have machloket between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan regarding somebody who's tamei who ate the basar kodesh before zrikat damim. So Reish Lakish says lokeh, Rabbi Yochanan says not. Reish Lakish omer lokeh. Why? From the pasuk b'chol kodesh lo tiga lo shna lifnei zrika v'lo shna lachal zrika. Right, so we learn that from here. This basar kodesh, we wanted to say is referring specifically to after zrikat damim, but over here you see Reish Lakish says we learn from this pasuk that it doesn't matter if it's before or after. Lo shna lifnei zrika v'lo shna lachal zrika. Rabbi Yochanan says eino lokeh. Rabbi Yochanan says no, there's no Makkot here in this case. Why? Rabbi Yochanan letame. Rabbi Yochanan goes according to his reason, which is as follows, as we said at the beginning. Damar kra tumato. Right? We learned at Bichlal that there is a prohibition, there's an azara for eating basar kodshim when one is tamei from the gzera shava of tumato. V'chiktiv tumato, and when the pasuk over there says tumato, that is talking about lachal zrika dichtiv. That is where it refers to after Zrika and not before Zrika. So what we're going to say is that Reish Lakish is going to learn out from here a double limud again. It says, how does does Reish Lakish learn out the specific prohibition for Tameh to eat it after Zrikat Tameh, or additionally before Zrikat Tameh as well? So we say from the fact that it says Hai mi b'chol kodesh nafka, he learns it out from the fact that it says b'chol kodesh again. And Rashi points out Rashi a little bit further down, where he says how mi b'chol, from the fact that it says mi b'chol, mirabuye de b'chol, from the additional wording of b'chol. Darish Reish Lakish, Aflif Nei Zrika. That's where he learned even before Zrika, because it didn't have to say b'chol. It could have said b'kodesh lo tiga. Why does it say b'kol kodesh lo tiga? So essentially, what we're left with is that Reish Lakish learned out three things from this pasuk. From the pasuk it says b'chol kodesh lo tiga. The primary limit of the fact that the pasuk says it at all is the azhara for eating basar kodesh when one is tameh. From the fact that it says b'chol kodesh lo tiga, that it says it in the language of Negiyah, it comes to teach you Nazarah not just for eating, but Nazarah for touching as well. And from the fact that it says b'chol kodesh, and not just from Bakodesh, comes to teach you that it's whether this is before Zrikat Adam or whether it's after Zrikat Adam, then there would still be Nazarah, and that would apply. Okay, we will finish that up tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem, and then we'll move on to the next topic in the Gemara.
Shikoah, it's great.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Very
you, everybody.
nice.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks.